The market square was alive with noise. Aliens of different shapes and colors moved between stalls, their voices rising like a storm of laughter in trade. In the middle of that noise stood a human traveler. His clothes simple, his pack heavy from the long road. He had come seeking work, food, maybe just a quiet place, but instead he found a crowd gathered around a small figure. The figure was an alien girl, no taller than his shoulder. Her body was thin but straight, her eyes sharp with fire. She wore a warrior's sash, but it looked too big for her tiny frame. She stood in the dirt, facing 3 larger alien youths who laughed loudly. "Look at her," one jeered, his sharp teeth flashing in the sunlight. "She calls herself a warrior." The second smirked, tossing a wooden practice spear from hand to hand. "She is smaller than a child. What can she defend?" The crowd roared with laughter, pointing, clapping, shaking their heads. The human frowned. He had seen cruelty before, but here it was sharpened into something colder, mockery that cut deeper than any blade. Yet the tiny girl stood still, her chin lifted, her small hands tight around her wooden staff. "I am a warrior," she said. Her voice was steady. But he noticed the tremor in her arms. Size does not matter. Spirit is what matters. The bullies laughed harder. One lunged at her, swinging the spear to knock her off balance. She dodged quickly, her small feet kicking up dust. The human's eyes widened. She was fast, much faster than he expected. Another attacker tried to sweep her legs. She jumped lightly, spinning the staff in a blur. For a moment, the laughter dimmed. But when the bigger aliens shoved her back, sending her falling into the dirt, the crowd exploded again. "Tiny warrior," they shouted. "Tiny warrior, defender of nothing." The human's fists clenched. He wanted to step forward, but he stopped himself. Something held him in place. Not fear, but curiosity. He wanted to see what she would do. The girl rose again, dust on her face, a cut on her cheek. She wiped the blood with the back of her hand. Her eyes did not look at the crowd. They locked on the bullies. Her chest rose and fell with heavy breaths. But she raised her staff again, standing firm. "Laugh, if you want," she whispered, though the human was close enough to hear. A warrior is not made of height or muscle. A warrior is made of heart. The bullies attacked again. She blocked the first strike, parried the second, but the third pushed her down again. This time the crowd laughed so hard that even the stall keepers joined in. The human felt anger rise. But he saw the girl's face. She was not crying. Her lips were pressed tight, her eyes glowing with defiance. She would fight again and again, no matter how many times she was thrown down. The bullies grew bored at last. One spat in the dirt near her. "You are nothing, tiny one. You will always be nothing." They walked away, their laughter echoing through the square. The crowd began to disperse, still chuckling, shaking their heads. The girl stayed kneeling in the dirt. Her hands trembled. Her staff lay broken beside her. But still she did not cry. She only whispered to herself, "I am a warrior, even if no one believes it." The human finally stepped closer. He crouched down, picking up the broken half of her staff. He held it out to her. Their eyes met for the first time. She seemed startled. No one ever approached her after the mockery. "You fought well," the human said softly. His voice was calm. "Better than most of them. They only have size, but you have skill." She blinked, taking the broken staff from his hand. Her lips trembled, not from fear, but from the strange warmth of being recognized for a moment. Her defiance wavered and showed something else: loneliness. The human stood, adjusting his pack. He gave her one last nod before walking away, but in his mind, her image stayed. The tiny warrior who stood against laughter, and though the crowd forgot her within minutes, though the bullies laughed over their victory, the human carried a different thought as he left the square. They laughed at her today. He whispered to himself. But maybe, one day, she will make them all silent. Asterisk, the human walked away from the market square, but the image of the tiny warrior did not leave his mind. The sound of laughter, the broken staff, the stubborn fire in her eyes, all of it stayed with him. He had seen many strange things in his travels across alien worlds, but this girl felt different. Night came quickly. The alien city glowed with faint lanterns hanging from carved stone pillars. The air smelled of spice and smoke. The humans searched for a quiet place to rest. Yet something inside kept pulling him back toward the training yard, he told himself. It was curiosity, nothing more, but deep down he knew it was more than that. He found her again near the edge of the old wall, far from the crowd. She sat alone on a broken stone, her tiny shoulders hunched, her staff lay in her lap. Now bound together with strips of cloth, the cut on her cheek still bled faintly. But she ignored it. She was whispering words to herself, words the human could barely catch. I will not bend, I will not break, I am a warrior, she repeated. Like a chant, her voice was thin, but steady. The human stepped closer. His boots crunching on the gravel, she stiffened instantly, her head snapping toward him. Her eyes narrowed like a wild creature ready to defend itself. You again? She muttered, her voice sharp. Go laugh with the others. That is what they all do. I didn't come to laugh, the human said, keeping his voice calm. He lowered himself onto a nearby rock, careful not to get too close. I came to see if you were all right. I don't need pity, she spat, gripping the broken staff tighter. Her hands trembled. Though she tried to hide it, a warrior stands alone. I need no help. He studied her quietly. She was proud, too proud, but beneath that pride, he saw loneliness. He remembered her whisper in the dirt earlier, the words about heart. The belief she carried even when others mocked her. I'm not offering pity, the human said at last. I'm offering bandages. He opened his pack, pulling out a small roll of cloth. He held it out, not forcing her, just waiting. Her eyes flickered from his hand to his face. For a long moment, silence stretched between them. Then she snatched the bandages quickly. As if ashamed of needing them, she wrapped her own cheek with clumsy movements, refusing to let him do it. Still, she muttered under her breath. Why? Why would a stranger care? The human smiled faintly. Because I've seen warriors before. I know one when I see one. She froze. Her hands pausing mid-drap. Her eyes lifted slowly, meeting his. No one had ever said that to her. Not once. Not even her own clan. My clan left me, she said quietly. Her voice cracking for the first time. They said I was too small, too weak. They laughed. Just like the city does. They said a tiny warrior is no warrior at all. The human listened. In silence. Letting her words hang in the cool night air, she turned her face away, embarrassed by her own confession. And yet, he said softly, you still fight, even when they mock you. That is what makes you different. That is why you are stronger than them. She shook her head, gripping the staff so hard her knuckles turned pale. Strong. They push me down like dust. They break me. They break everything I hold. How is that strong? Because strength is not how many times you stay standing, the human answered. It is how many times you rise after falling. Her breath caught. She stared at him as if hearing a language no one had ever spoken to her before. Her pride fought against his words, but her heart wanted to believe, for the first time. A small smile touched her lips, faint, trembling, but real. You speak strangely, human, she said, her voice softer now, but, Ali, your words feel heavier than theirs. They sat in silence for a while. The stars blinked above them. The alien city quieted as traders closed their stalls. Only the two of them remained by the broken wall, bound together, not by strength or size, but by something. Deeper, at last, she rose, straightening her sash. Her small frame stood tall against the night. I will fight tomorrow, and the next day, and the next, until they see, until they understand. The human nodded. They will, he said, his voice certain. One day, they will see who you are. She glanced at him one last time before walking away, her steps light but determined. Her shadow melted into the lantern glow, but her presence lingered. The human watched her vanish into the night. His chest tightened with a feeling he could not explain. He whispered to himself, "They laugh today, but one day she will make them silent." And in that quiet moment, under the stars of an alien world, a bond had been formed, fragile, unspoken, but unbreakable. The days passed quickly. The humans settled into the alien city, doing small tasks, carrying goods, and trading stories for food. But no matter where he went, he often saw the tiny warrior. Sometimes she trained alone in the dusty courtyards. Sometimes she walked the narrow alleys with her broken staff, her head held high even as others whispered behind her. She never smiled when others were near, yet when she fought the air itself, swinging her staff against invisible enemies, her eyes burned like fire. The human watched from a distance. He did not speak much, but each time she noticed him, she held her chin a little higher, as if his quiet presence gave her strength. But shadows began to stir around the city. Rumors spread like cold wind. Raiders were gathering beyond the hills. Bands of merciless creatures who had burned villages and stolen everything they touched. The city guards laughed at the rumors, saying their warriors were strong. Their laughter echoed like it had in the market square that first day, dismissing the danger, yet the humans saw signs others ignored. Supply trains went missing. Distant farms lay in silence. The night sky glowed faintly with smoke from villages too far away to save. He knew the threat was real, and strangely, he saw the tiny warrior knew it too. One evening, he found her in the abandoned training yard. She was striking a wooden post. Again and again, her arms shook from exhaustion. Sweat dripped down her face. The bandage on her cheek had turned brown with dried blood. Still, she did not stop. "You train as if the war is already here," the human said quietly. She didn't turn. Her strikes grew sharper, faster, louder, because it is. She replied, "I hear them at night. The raiders, they are coming. I feel it in my bones." The human stepped closer. His voice lowered, "And if they come, the great warriors will fight. They say they can defend the walls." She laughed bitterly, the sound thin and broken. "The great warriors," she said, spitting the words. "They drink, they boast, they laugh. They do not bleed, they do not train. When the raiders come, they will fall first." Her staff cracked against the post, splinters flying. She froze, gripping the broken wood with trembling hands for a long moment. The silence of the yard seemed to swallow her. The human stepped forward, picking up the half that had snapped. He held it out to her like he had on the first day. She stared at him, her eyes wet but not from weakness, from rage, from defiance. "They will never see me," she whispered, her voice shaking. "They will always laugh, no matter how hard. I fight. I am only a shadow to them, a tiny shadow." The human met her gaze. "Sometimes shadows are the strongest," he said, "because they move unseen, because they wait until the light blinds the proud." Her lips trembled. She wanted to believe him, but years of mockery pressed heavy on her heart. She dropped the broken staff and sank to her knees. Her small fists dug into the dirt. "I fight and fight," she whispered. "But what for? They will never honor me. They will never call me warrior." The human knelt beside her. His voice was low but firm. "Then don't fight for them." She looked up at him, confused. His words struck deeper than any spear. "Fight for yourself." He said, "Fight because you are one, because you believe it, not because they do. For a long time, she said nothing. Only the night wind answered, carrying the faint smell of smoke from the hills beyond. Finally, she rose slowly. Her small frame shook, but her eyes were steady. "I will fight," she said, her voice a whisper. "Not for them, not even for you, but for me." The human nodded. "That is enough," he said. "And when the time comes, they will see whether they want to or not." The days grew darker. Traders brought news of entire towns vanishing. Only silence remained where life once was. The laughter in the city began to thin. Though the proud warriors still boasted, their armor shone, their voices were loud, but their eyes betrayed fear. Meanwhile, the tiny warrior trained harder. She sparred with shadows until her arms bled. She ran the walls of the city at night when no one watched. And sometimes, when she stumbled with exhaustion, she looked up to see the human watching quietly. His eyes steady, and she would rise again, never letting him see her break. But the shadows were moving closer. One night, the sound of distant horns drifted across the valley. The human heard it. She heard it too. They exchanged no words, but both knew the invasion was no longer a rumor. It was coming. And as the city slept in denial, one tiny warrior whispered to the stars, "Let them laugh one more time. When the darkness falls, I will show them all." The night was restless. Clouds covered the moon, and the alien city slept. In uneasy silence, the human lay awake in his small, rented room, his ear tuned to every sound. He had traveled many lands. And he knew silence like this was never safe. It was the kind of silence that came before storms. Then it began. A horn echoed across the valley. Deep and dreadful, it rolled over the walls like thunder. The human sat up at once. His instincts screamed danger from the northern hills. Lights flickered, not the soft glow of lanterns, but the burning of fire. The raiders had come. The city bells clanged wildly, waking the sleeping masses. Doors opened, voices shouted in panic. The proud warriors rushed from their halls, still fastening their armor, their boasts now drowned in fear. The human grabbed his small blade and ran toward the walls. His heart pounded. The streets were filled with chaos, mothers dragging children, merchants clutching their wares. Some shouted, some prayed, but most simply ran on the high wall. The torches revealed them creatures twice the size of normal men, covered in black iron. Their war cries split the air. Their beasts clawed at the gates. Soldiers on the wall fired arrows, but many missed their mark. Fear made their hands shake. In the chaos, the human's eyes searched the crowd. There, standing small but unyielding, was the tiny warrior, her broken staff replaced by a short, sharpened blade, her sash tied tight across her chest, her face pale, but her eyes burning with that same fire. She looked at the human for the briefest second. A silent message passed between them. She would not hide. Not tonight. The raiders slammed against the gate. Wood cracked, chains strained, the proud warriors lined up, shouting orders, but the tremble in their voices betrayed their fear. With a thunderous crash, the gate splintered. The raiders stormed through like a flood. Their blades caught the torchlight as screams filled the air. The warriors who had laughed at the tiny girl charged boldly, only to be cut down within moments. The crowd that once mocked her now shrieked in terror as blood stained the streets. The human fought desperately, slashing at a raider's leg. But the blade barely pierced the thick hide armor. The enemy swung a heavy axe. Grazing his shoulder, pain burned through him. He stumbled, barely keeping his grip. The raider raised the axe again, ready to finish him, and then a small figure leaped between them. It was her. The tiny warrior's blade flashed in the firelight. She struck the raider's arm with speed, not strength. Her blade found the gap between plates. The raider howled, staggering back. For a heartbeat, the human Stared in shock, she was trembling, but she had not run. "Stay behind me," she shouted, her voice sharp, her chest heaved with each breath. Her hands shook, but her stance was firm. The human gritted his teeth, wiping the blood from his shoulder. He stood beside her. "Not behind her. No," he said, his voice steady. "We fight together." More raiders poured into the square. The air filled with the clash of steel and the cries of the wounded. The proud warriors scattered, some fleeing, some falling. The human and the tiny warrior stood their ground. Back to back, she moved like lightning, small and quick. Her blade struck where armor was weakest. She ducked and rolled, cutting tendons, piercing throats. The raiders laughed at first, mocking the size of their opponent, until they realized, too late, that her speed was death. The human fought clumsier, heavier. But his will burned bright. Each time he faltered, she was there, blocking a strike. Pulling him back, every time she staggered, he shielded her with his arm. The crowd that had once laughed began to gather at a distance, their eyes wide with disbelief. The tiny warrior, the one they had called useless, was the only one holding. The line, a monstrous raider with horns on his helmet, stepped forward, his axe as tall as the girl herself. He grinned, pointing at her with the blade. "Little worm," he growled, his voice like thunder. "I will crush you." The human stepped forward, but she raised her hand. "No," she whispered. "This one is mine." She charged, her small frame moved faster than sight. She slid under the swing of the axe, cutting at his legs. He roared, stumbling, swinging again. The force shook the ground. The girl's blade flashed once more, finding the weak spot beneath his arm. The raider fell with a scream. The square grew silent for a heartbeat. All eyes locked on her. The tiny warrior stood over the fallen giant, chest heaving, eyes fierce. The human stared in awe. He had seen true warriors before, but none like this, none so small, none so mocked, none so brave. The silence broke as more raiders roared into the square. The battle was not over. It had only begun. But already, the people's whispers had changed. No one laughed now. They only watched. Their fear mixing with something new, hope, and as. The human raised his blade once more. He realized the truth. She was no longer fighting for herself alone. She was fighting for them all. The square burned with firelight. Smoke curled above the rooftops. The screams of the city mixed with the clash of blades. The proud warriors had scattered, their courage gone with the first wave. The people who had laughed at the tiny warrior were now hiding in corners, their eyes wide, their breaths short. But in the middle of the chaos stood two figures, a human with blood on his arm and a tiny warrior with fire in her eyes. They stood back to back, blades raised, facing the storm. The raiders surged forward, armored giants with cruel laughter. On their lips, they swung axes and spears, certain the fight would end in moments. Yet each time the blades fell, the girl darted like a spark. Her small size became her greatest strength. She slipped through gaps, struck at joints, cut at throats. Her movements were not wild, but sharp, like a dancer who had trained for this night alone. The human fought too, clumsy compared to her, but fierce. He swung wide, blocked heavy strikes with sheer will. He threw broken stones when his blade grew heavy. He bled from his shoulder, his breath grew harsh, but still he did not step back. The people whispered from the shadows, "The tiny one fights. She is holding them. She is not afraid." Their voices trembled, not with laughter now, but with awe. The raiders grew frustrated. How could such a small creature stand against them? One of them snarled, "Break her?" He charged with a spear. The girl spun, sliding under the thrust. Her blade slashed the back of his knee. He screamed, falling forward. She finished him with a swift strike before rolling back to her feet. The human glanced at her, his chest heaving. "You're not fighting alone anymore," he said. She gave him a quick nod, not wasting words. But wave after wave came. Their arms ached, their legs trembled. The human's vision blurred from blood loss. The girls' breaths came sharp and fast. Still, neither yielded. She remembered her clan's words, too small, too weak, never a warrior. She remembered the laughter in the market, the spit on the dirt, and with each memory, her blade grew. Sharper, her movements faster, her spirit brighter. The human felt it too. He fought not for glory, not for himself, but to protect the fire he saw in her. He thought of her words, "A warrior is made of heart," and he knew she was right. The ground grew slick with blood. Bodies lay across the square. The raiders hesitated now, their numbers still large, but their confidence shaken. This tiny figure, this fragile girl, had cut down more of them than any of the city's proud defenders. The horned leader, the one who had shouted before, snarled in rage. He stepped forward. Lifting a massive warhammer, his voice shook the square. "Enough games, little insect, I will crush you with my hand." The people gasped. The human stepped forward, ready to meet him, but the girl raised her hand again. Her voice was firm. "This fight is mine." Her blade gleamed in the firelight. She charged, dodging the first swing. The hammer struck stone, shattering it. Dust filled the air. She darted in, cutting his side. He roared, swinging again. The ground shook. The human shouted, "Careful." But she did not falter. Her feet danced across the bloodied stones. Each strike was precise. Each movement born from endless nights of training alone. She moved faster than his eyes could follow. Finally, she leaped. Her blade flashed upward, cutting. Across his face, he screamed. Dropping to one knee, she landed lightly. Her chest heaving, her blade raised high. The raiders froze. Stunned by the fall of their commander, the people stared, their mouths open. The laughter that had once filled the square was gone. Only silence remained. The human moved to her side. His arm trembled as he lifted his blade again. "There?" "Not finished," he whispered. She nodded. Her legs shook. Her arms burned. But she planted her feet and raised her blade once more. "Then neither am I," she said. Together, they stood side by side. The tiny warrior and the human, facing the horde. They had no strength left to spare, no backup, no cheers, only their will remained. And still, they did not break. The people in the shadows watched. Something stirred inside them. Shame. Courage. Hope. A child whispered, "She is a warrior." The words spread through the crowd like fire. Soon voices rose, trembling but strong. "Warrior. Warrior. Warrior." The girl's eyes flickered at the sound, for the first time. Her lips curved into a smile, faint but real. It gave her strength to lift her blade once more. The raiders roared, charging again, but this time, the fight was different. The people no longer laughed, no longer doubted. They watched with wide eyes as the tiny warrior faced the tide. Her body was failing, but her spirit only grew brighter. With each strike, each breath, she defied everything they had ever said about her. The human, though wounded and weary, matched her stand. His voice rose above the chaos, strong and unyielding. "You'll have to go through us both." The battle raged, but one truth became clear in that burning square. She was no longer the girl they mocked. She was their shield, their fire, their warrior. And though the night was far from over, the people would never forget what they saw. A tiny figure standing fierce when all others fell. The battle dragged on through the night. The square was a graveyard of fire and blood. The cries of the wounded echoed against stone walls. The air stank of smoke, sweat, and iron. Yet in the middle of that nightmare, the human and the tiny warrior still stood. Their arms trembled. Their legs barely held them. Every breath was heavy. Every strike burned through their muscles. But their spirits did not break. The raiders pressed forward again. Their numbers still strong. The human staggered as a blade sliced across his side. Pain flared, but he forced himself upright. Beside him, the tiny warrior's movements slowed. Her cuts less sharp, her dodges more desperate. Yet her eyes never lost their fire. The crowd watched from the edges, silent now. No one laughed, no one mocked. They saw what she was, the last wall between them and destruction, the raider leader. Scarred and furious. Pushed through his men once more, his warhammer stained with blood. His voice roared above the chaos. "You are nothing but a child. You will die forgotten." The girl raised her blade, though her hands shook. "Then remember this," she whispered. Her voice barely more than breath. "A warrior fights. Even when death is certain." He charged, his hammer swung. The human tried to block, but the force sent him flying to the ground. His vision blurred. He coughed blood. Through the haze, he saw her still standing, her tiny frame dwarfed by the monster before her. She screamed and lunged. Her blade struck deep, piercing under his ribs. The raider howled. Lifting his hammer high, with a final roar, he brought it down. The sound cracked through the square. When the dust cleared, the human saw her. The tiny warrior lay on her knees, blood spilling down her side, her blade still buried in the leader's chest. He staggered back, falling with a crash. Dead before he hit the ground, the people gasped. The raiders froze. Their leader had fallen to the smallest among them. The human crawled to her, his hands shaking. "Stay with me," he cried, his voice cracked with desperation. He lifted her in his arms. Her body was light, too light. Her breaths came shallow, ragged. Her lips moved, barely a whisper. Did they see? Tears burned in his eyes. He nodded. They saw. They all saw. Her eyes softened. For the first time, there was no defiance. No anger, only peace. Blood dripped from her mouth as she whispered. Then, "It was worth it." He shook his head, pressing his hand against her wound. "No, stay with me. You are stronger than this. You are a warrior. You can't leave now." Her hand, small and trembling, touched his arm. A warrior's life is not measured by how long she stands. It is measured by what she defends. Her breath shuddered. "And I defended you." His heart broke. The square blurred through his tears. Around them, the crowd had gathered, silent, wide-eyed. They stared at her. Not with laughter, not with scorn, but with reverence. The tiny warrior smiled faintly. The last strength fading from her lips, at least. "I was a warrior," she whispered. And then her eyes closed. The human held her tighter. His cry tore through the night. Raw and broken, he shook her gently, refusing to believe. His hands pressed against her wound, though he knew it was useless. The raiders, stunned by their leader's death and the sight of the fallen girl, began to retreat. Their courage shattered. They fled into the darkness, leaving behind their dead. But the victory tasted like ashes. The people gathered, their voices hushed. Children hid behind their mothers. Old men wept. For the first time, the city looked at her with truth. The human laid her gently on the stone. His hand brushing the dirt from her cheek, he whispered through clenched teeth, "They laughed at you. They mocked you, but tonight you silenced them all." The people bowed their heads. Some knelt, some whispered her name, not in mockery, but in honor. The human stayed by her side long after the fires dimmed, his blood still dripping, his body broken, but his spirit locked on her. She had given everything, her last breath, her last strike. Not for herself, but for him. The dawn broke slowly. Pale light stretched across the ruined square. The human rose at last, lifting her small body in his arms. He carried her through the silent streets, every step heavy, every eye upon him. Not one dared to laugh now. At the edge of the city, he looked to the horizon. His voice was soft, almost a vow. You may be gone, but you will not be forgotten. They will remember the tiny warrior who fought when all others fled, and I will make sure your story never dies. And with that, the legend of the tiny warrior began, a story not of size, not of strength, but of heart, a story carved in blood and sacrifice, a story that would echo forever. The dawn spread across the city. Pale light revealed the ruins left by the night's battle. Broken stones, shattered gates, and blood-stained streets told the story of chaos. Yet among the wreckage, silence ruled, for the people were not speaking of their own fear. They were whispering about her. The tiny warrior, the human, walked through the streets carrying her body in his arms. His steps were slow, each one heavy. The people followed behind him, their faces lowered. Their laughter gone forever. Some wept openly, others pressed hands to their hearts. All eyes were on the girl they had once mocked. At the city square, he laid her gently on a raised stone. The crowd gathered around. No one dared to speak first. Finally, an elder stepped forward, his voice trembling. She defended us all. We who mocked her now live because of her courage. Murmurs spread. The people nodded. Shame weighed on them like chains. They remembered the market, the laughter, the insults, and the way she stood alone in the dirt. Now that same girl had saved their lives with her last breath. The human stood tall, his voice carrying through the silent square. You called her small. You called her weak. You called her nothing. But last night she proved she was greater than all of you. Greater than me, greater than anyone here. She was a warrior. The crowd bowed their heads, some knelt, their pride broken. A mother clutched her child and whispered, "Remember her name?" Children looked at her small figure with wide eyes. Already sensing the weight of her story, the city buried her with honor. A stone marker was raised at the center of the square. Upon it, they carved the words, "Here lies the tiny warrior." Mocked in life, but fearless in death, she gave her last breath to defend those who scorned her. But her story did not end there. The human did not leave the city. He stayed. Telling her tale to anyone who would listen, he traveled from village to village, carrying her memory like a torch. Wherever he went, he spoke the same words. They laughed at her. Until she defended me with her last breath. The story spread like fire, across alien worlds, across distant clans. People spoke of the tiny warrior who had faced giants and stood unbroken. They told of her courage, her sacrifice, her spirit. Some added details, some shaped it into song. But the truth remained. She had become legend. Children began to play in the streets, pretending to be her. They tied cloth sashes across their chests, wielding sticks as blades, shouting, "I am a warrior." Parents no longer scolded them. Instead, they smiled through tears, whispering, "Be like her." Brave and unyielding, the warriors of the city, once arrogant, now trained harder when they faltered. Their trainers reminded them, "Remember, the tiny one who fought while you hid." They carried shame, but also a new strength. For her spirit had become their guide. The human often returned to her grave. Sitting by the stone marker in silence, sometimes he spoke softly, telling her of how the people were changing. Sometimes he laughed sadly, remembering her defiant eyes. Sometimes he said nothing at all, letting the quiet speak for him. One night, under the stars, he whispered, "You may have been small in body, but your spirit was larger than the sky. They will never forget you. And neither will I." Years passed, the city rebuilt its walls. The gates were stronger, the people wiser. And at the heart of it all stood the monument of the tiny warrior. Flowers lay at its base, offerings of respect from those who had once offered only scorn. Travelers came from distant lands to see it, to hear the tale. They left carrying her story with them, and soon, across the stars, across countless worlds, the name of the tiny warrior was known not as a joke, not as a mockery, but as a legend of courage. The human aged his hair grayed, his steps slowed. Yet each time he saw a child swing a wooden stick and shout, "I am a warrior," his heart swelled, for he knew she lived on in every voice, every step, every act of courage. On his final visit to her grave, he placed his hand on the stone and whispered, "I kept my promise. They know your name. They honor you. You will never be forgotten." And as the stars shone above, her story remained the story of the tiny warrior who was laughed at, who was mocked, who was scorned, till the night she gave her last breath, defending those who never believed in her. She was more than tiny. She was more than a warrior. She was eternal.